I want to ask a question. Why do we do this at all? Why do we develop machine learning techniques, algorithms, and why do we prove theorems and such? My opinion is it should be done because it matters, and we need to spend more effort and focus more on making it matter. So today I'm going to give you my view of how we can make difference with machine learning, a positive difference, hopefully. So I'll start with a little bit of a background, and I'm going to talk about a few opportunities, a small selection of topics that I have hands-on experience with, which either already yielded something that is societally impactful and useful, or is in a process of getting there. And I hope that this review will give you an insight on what are the challenges that somewhat separate the academic world from the real world, and try to argue with you that those differences are not unsurmountable to the extent that should prevent academicians from making a big step in their own mind to the real world. And the last, perhaps the most important question that I want to address would be what prevents us from doing this? So maybe since you brought up this topic, why not? Maybe my mouse is somewhere else. Okay, great. So since you brought up this topic, PL in ML, I have to tell you, because all of you guys are much younger than I am, and I remember things that you probably never heard about. You must have heard about this conference called International Conference on Machine Learning, ICML. It was actually conceived in the early 1980s by these three people. In fact, there was somebody else who coined in the term machine learning before them, but it wasn't really operationally active until then. And these three people met at Carnegie Mellon University, of all places, and the group included Tom Mitchell, who later on wrote the first book on machine learning, and he became the first head of the first department on machine learning at Carnegie Mellon. And he's still very active, currently acting as a dean of School of Computer Science at CMU. Jaime Carbonell was a professor at CMU at the time, and he later on became a director of Language Technologies Institute. So if you're into NLP, you cannot miss publications coming from that group at CMU. And Ryszard Michalski, who unfortunately died about 11 years ago, who later on became a professor at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, next to Washington, D.C., a pioneer of inductive learning. Three of them gathered together, and they decided that there are so many people, and they counted about 25 or 30, who are interested scientifically in adaptive programming. And they thought it would be appropriate to have a workshop to talk about those things, gather all these people that they knew about. And they took this idea with the tentative title of the workshop, Machine Learning, to a Nobel Prize laureate, a Professor Simon at CMU, one of the founders of artificial intelligence. And they asked him his opinion, and they couldn't get on his calendar quick enough. By the time they met him, he told them, it's a stupid idea to call this field this way, because people will be confusing it with the opposite idea, which is to use computers to teach people, right? Which is happening right now, by the way. It's a big field, right? Educational applications of machine learning anyways. So he basically nicked their concept. The problem was they already sent invitations because they couldn't get on his calendar early enough. And that's how ICML started. And then I had the pleasure in 2006 to host as ICML at CMU in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And all three of them were able to come to the conference dinner and give 5 minutes each speech about this history. It was a wonderful loop. Now, when you look at the nationalities, Professor Michalski, of course, from Poland, born near Lwów, educated mostly in Poland, and moved to the US and set a stronghold of Polish students coming to join him and complete their PhD studies with him in the United States. A very prolific author of papers on inductive learning. Jaime Carbonell was born in Uruguay, but then moved to the US and was there since. If you have a few beers with Tom Mitchell, he will tell you, after a certain number of beers, that he's got very strong Polish roots. So if you look at this, you should not be surprised that plinml is for real and has always been. So you guys have beautiful footsteps to follow, and please continue this for the sake of your and next generations. All right? So with this motivational speech, let me tell you about my team now. We have celebrated, actually, the 25th anniversary of the team. It has been started by Andrew Moore, another stronghold in machine learning, but unfortunately, Google claimed Andrew again for the second time in his career, and he left CMU again a couple of months ago. Anyways, I took over when he left for Google for the first time in 2006. I thought it would be only for a few months, and then I'll follow him to Google, but it's too much fun. Maybe I could quadruple my salary, but it would be not much fun over there. So what we do is we do with a large team of more than 70 researchers. It's a fairly large group for university standards. Actually, I don't know how many we have right now, because last year I did a head count, and I stopped at 70. I was scared to continue. My sysadmin tells me that we have 120 active users of our computer cluster. So we are of the size of a real department, but we are not. We are just a lab. And our budget is commensurate with the size of the team. And so what we do is we do foundational research into machine learning. This is something that is a focus of our PhD and master's students, as well as our postdocs. In terms of composition of this team, about 2/3 as the usual suspects in academia, students, postdocs, and such. And we have 3 faculty, including myself. So we work on foundations, but this research is motivated by what people need in the real world. We want to be connected to the real world. We want to deploy our systems, and we want to learn from the experience. Instead of just sitting on our rear end and keep writing scientific papers, and all to show for that would be an increasing pile of those papers on our shelves, we really want to see what the other people need and help them using machine learning. And that actually guides us with our research to the areas which are important these days. And so I said that we've been doing this for 25 years, and our unofficial motto, our goal in life as a team is very simple. We want to make sure that everyone uses machine learning everywhere at all times. It's very simple. You can look around and check by yourself how far we got. Of course, not too far. And this is very disappointing. But there are many good reasons for that. There are many borders, there are many boundaries that prevent us from pushing very good stuff that we generate here in academia out there. And to me, it's very frustrating that we don't do enough along those lines as a community. As a community, we are not also honest to our sponsors. Many governments and non-governmental organizations and industry have been pouring tons and tons of money into research in machine learning. Maybe we don't see much of this money coming to Poland, unfortunately. Maybe we should start changing that. But worldwide, it's a massive amount of money. And what can we show for that? What kind of societal problems we have solved? Have we solved the world hunger? Not yet, right? So what I'm saying is we need to give back to the society. And we need to be focused on that. So we try to do that. We try to model this kind of organization, build a model, and so that others can follow. And so our model involves, solving the fundamental questions. Right now, my personal focus is on making artificial intelligence accessible to people, experts and non-experts alike, and making it easy to immerse in the existing pipelines of various applications, so that we are not disruptive in a wrong way, but disruptive in a good way, and making it generally useful. We want to make those systems easy to deploy and affordable to maintain so that we don't end at the pilot study phase, which is one of the plagues that bother me in the real world. There are many projects that end at the pilot stage and never continue because there is no momentum, because there are costs of upkeeping them in the longer time. So let's reduce those costs. We want to make them more feasible for general applications, and one of the issues with machine learning is that you have to have some amount of training data in most cases. And getting this training data is not easy or cheap in most important cases. There is plenty of data if you want to train a cut detector in video. But what kind of societal problem does it solve? It demonstrates capability, right? So when you want to translate into solving something for real, the game changes. So how do we reduce the needs for the actual annotated data and still build useful systems? So the bottom of the slide shows the foundational research that we pursue, and of course this list is vastly incomplete. The middle pane shows some of this research that graduated to the level of a proof of concept. And in this slide in particular, I'm showing a lot of applications in critical care medicine. These environments are very interesting because patients are wired with sensors of various modalities, and lots of data potentially can be collected from them in real time. And doctors and nurses are up to a very formidable task of making sense of this data on the fly and always make correct decisions in time. In this environment, especially in critical care, it's a very dynamic environment. People can deteriorate quickly and die. Excuse me. So there is lots of room for our help in this space. So we have a bunch of projects in there. And then the top pane shows actually systems that have been deployed. And we have a long list of those systems. I'm only showing a few with the idea to just give you a few examples. The pane in the middle shows that we are not graphical user designers. I don't feel very proud of what you see there, but this is a screenshot of our web interface for one of the analytics systems that we built for the United States Department of Agriculture, in particular the Food Safety and Inspection Service. Have you ever worked with the US government before? Anyone? How about Polish government or any government of the European Union? Some? Well, my experience working with governments in many places, including Poland and the US, is that when you pick any two organizations in the government, they don't usually like working together. And this is especially prominent in the US. So the reason I put this picture on the top of the slide is because I'm very proud of it, because this system brought together to the same room and forced them to work together two different agencies of the US government. The Department of Agriculture, Food Safety and Inspection Service. These people collect data about food safety. And then CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. These people look at the public health, and they see a person who is sick with foodborne illness, they record them in a database. So we connected these two organizations, they started working together, and they work together using our tool for about 10 years now. And hopefully this makes our food supply safer. It may sound weird, but in the US, we have 76 million cases of recorded foodborne illnesses every year. And about 5,000 people die just because they ate something. And US is not considered a very dirty place on average. So we don't like those statistics, right? We want to help the government do a better job, as well as industry, do a better job preventing those things from happening. And now with the data that they routinely collect, they can use our analytic systems based on machine learning and statistics to detect emerging patterns of threat and mitigate them before they spread. Do we have any physicists in the room? All right, good. Thank you. So I learned a lot about physicists when we got to work with Lawrence Livermore National Lab. You know, those guys who a while ago built nuclear weapons. Now they are protecting us from nuclear weapons. They switch sides. They changed their focus. Very good people. They know everything there is to know about nuclear physics of radiation. And so we joined forces, and we built a system that is now on a fast pace to full deployment after a number of successful pilots already for the US Customs. After September 11 terror attacks in the US, the US government was very scared about bad guys doing more nasty things. Food supply safety was one of the big challenges. We didn't know how to prevent that. Public health was another challenge. We got involved in both of those. And the next thing was a dirty bomb, radiological device. that may be smuggled into the country or assembled within the country and detonated to cause massive casualty. So that was very seriously treated by the government, and they very quickly deployed a number of radiation detection systems. That yellow gate that you see in the picture is a radiation portal monitor. Everything that comes into the US through land crossings has to go through these sensors. In fact, everything and everyone who comes to the US goes through radiation detection. Even you may not know that when you come to the airport. So the sensors are built to be sensitive, right? Because we don't want any dirty stuff to be brought to the US without us knowing, right? The challenge is, what is the challenge when you have a sensitive sensor? It will detect a lot of stuff, right? And there is a lot of stuff around us, the physicists can confirm, that are naturally radioactive. So one example is ceramics. Ceramics is naturally radioactive. So you have a truckload of toilet seats coming from Canada. They trigger those sensors. And you're a customs officer. You're not a nuclear physicist. What do? Well, you have to manually inspect perhaps a very large cargo container. It takes your time, and you cannot detect anything really dangerous. This is naturally occurring radioactive material. Bananas are radioactive. They contain potassium, bona fide radioactive isotope. You eat 1, 2, 3 bananas, that's fine. That's actually healthy for you. But you have a truckload of them coming from Mexico, they trigger those sensors. Quite often, not every time. Depends on the quantity, I guess. So don't eat bananas when you use your toilet. That may be too much. Silly joke. But we worked together with our physicists, and we developed a system that reduces the need for secondary inspections by hand of those perhaps large truck containers by more than 1 order of magnitude. That changes the dynamics of how the time of customs officers is used at the border crossing. And coming back to the physicists, I learned one very useful thing. If the rest of you non-physicists ever work with physicists, this may be a useful lesson for you, because it took me some time to figure it out. And if I did, I would probably make much more progress to begin with. So the physicists actually know everything about everything. And they cannot help it. This is how it is. And so one useful thing, how to collaborate with them effectively, is to acknowledge that up front, that you already know that they know everything about everything. Otherwise, they will be tempted to keep proving it to you. And that will be a distraction. So navigate around that. Tell them up front. And they are good people. It's fun working with them. I learned a lot. So if you're a US government and suddenly you have a slack of labor because you save some of those customs officers' time because they don't have to go and manually inspect some of these cargo containers. Of course, I wouldn't have to tell you that even if we reduce the necessary inspections, we cannot afford increasing the risk of smuggling anything dirty into the country. So our system actually doubled the capability of detecting those things. All right? So we are not losing anything. We are only benefiting. That's why US Customs is in love with it, and that's why I have to spend half of my life in Washington, D.C. helping them deploy it everywhere these days. So what do you do with this labor slack? These people are done. You can fire them, right? No. If you're an employee of the US government, you are almost impossible to fire. Governments everywhere just grow. They never shrink, right? So this is one example. So what can you do? Well, the good thing, or perhaps a bad thing, is that these customs officers, they have other things to worry about. Things like drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, and human trafficking, which brings me to my next picture. And that is, all those trafficking things is what actually provides funding to all the adversary organizations around the world that don't wish very well to the United States. They usually don't get state funding anymore. They have to get their money from somewhere else. So these 3 things is how they make money. So the US, various departments are very interested in figuring out how to reduce money stream that comes from those illicit activities to those organizations. But about 5 years ago, I was approached by an undergrad student in humanities at CMU. This young lady had no clue about machine learning. She could operate her MacBook typing beautiful essays. That was about it. And she was getting ready to compose her graduation thesis with a bachelor's degree. And she came to my office, somebody sent her my way because they thought that I'm silly enough to listen to her. And they were right. She comes to my office and up front tells me that we have a problem in the United States. I said, oh, only one? That's nice. But she says, no, seriously. About 100,000 children in the US are at risk to be sold for sex every year. A new batch of 100,000 children. When I heard that, I was shocked. I didn't believe that, but I checked. Apparently, there are publications confirming that. It's ridiculous. And 85% of these children are born and raised in the United States. When people talk about sex trafficking, they usually think, oh, it's about bringing flesh from overseas, Asia, Russia, all those places. It's more or less domestic business. So I said, okay, what do we do about that? And she said, well, you know what? Most of this business is advertising online. There are escort service advertisement sites, websites, in the public. And this is how this business attracts potential customers. They have to market their commodities. That's the easiest way these days. So the suggestion was, can we use machine learning to make sense of that data and help rescue victims and help law enforcement take bad guys into prison? So we started working on this topic, lots of natural language processing because the advertisements come in the form of text. It's a weird text, it's a jargon, lots of special characters and other design styles that are very specific, so you cannot potentially use the pre-existing technology exactly. And there are images and videos. So within a few months, we had a prototype system that we demonstrated to a few organizations in law enforcement across the United States and Canada. And honestly, before we knew it, we had 400 users among 400 organizations using it as a pilot. And they were telling us good stories about how it helped them save their efforts and focus their efforts on nabbing the particularly notorious groups, taking advantage of those young people and other people who were coerced to become prostitutes. So that was a success. At that point, the success was, there was an attempt to stop it because the legal office from CMU came to me yelling at me that I'm doing something illegal because we are not supposed to build products and sell products. We are supposed to do fundamental research here at CMU. We are a non-profit university and we have tax breaks, and if we violate those rules, we're going to go bankrupt. So they forced us to spin off a company. The company could take care of the end users while we continue doing research to continue developing the product. Right? And this company has been quite successful, although the market is very thin. You can't make money helping law enforcement in the US. Guess who is the president of that company? The young lady who brought the problem to my office. That's really one of those stories that I'm very proud about. That shows that, in a good organization like CMU, you have no boundary between departments, you have no gender gaps, you have no age gaps. Everybody is working together under the presumption of being a sensible person, right, and meaning well. So we have dozens of underage victims pulled from circulation using our software. I attended a few sting operations, including very funny ones at LAPD. If you watched any comedy movies about LAPD, Police Academy and our spoofs, that's different, but not too different. So it's very interesting. And and we worked with nonprofits and others to help rescue those people. So the numbers go in dozens and lots of bad people in prison. All because, we connected dots. So as you will see, the most impressive applications of machine learning lie at the intersections of different boundaries. It's not any domain on its own, usually. That's where I think the lowest hanging fruit are. It's a bunch of projects that we've done in critical care medicine. I'm trying to find my mouse here, and because this is a video. Can somebody help me while I'm, okay, it showed up. Can you click on the button? So lots of predictive analytics can be accomplished at the bedside of the intensive care patients, people who go through surgery and what's not. The idea here is to get the useful information to the clinicians early, before things really deteriorate, so that they can have more time to respond and address the issues. lots of challenges there. Those monitoring systems that are at the bedside of patients, they are designed to be sensitive, just like those radiation sensors, so they trigger on many things. And apparently only 15% of those alerts are medically relevant. Others are due to malfunction of the devices or sensors. You have this large sensor of oxygenation on your fingertip or ECG electrode dislodges and disconnects, and then the data is corrupt. This should be fixed, right? Otherwise, we won't be getting reliable data for the patients, but it's not as urgent as somebody going through a heart attack, right? So we develop systems that actually allow us to adjudicate those alerts that come real time and decide how urgent they are for better allocation of operating resources. If we had this movie, you will see those little dots moving about. This is an experiment that involves pigs. They are put in a lab, wired with all the sensors, some of them highly invasive. They require making holes in the body and installing them close to the heart and such. Basically, we can study the extent of sensing devices that we need for a particular case. And I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties. That's all right. So I'm going to tell you how this movie looks. These guys move about. Each dot is a pig. These pigs are first anesthetized and wired with the sensors and kept stable, unharmed, for a while, about half an hour, from this red bar to this blue bar. And then after that, they are being bled slowly. Somebody opens a valve and blood starts dripping at a fixed rate. One of the challenges is to detect this bleeding, which resembles slow bleeding in human who went through the surgery. And apparently, if you don't detect that bleeding, people are discharged from the hospital after surgery, and 2 days later, they may be rushed back to the hospital with serious inflammation, and some of them die. So it's very difficult to detect using traditional ways of analyzing these sensors, but then when you go highly multivariate with machine learning, you can actually achieve that. You can achieve detection of internal bleeding before a glass load of blood is lost. So that's pretty good. You will see a few things if you watch this movie. First of all, when pigs are healthy, they are very diverse. This is just projection on 2 dimensions out of a few thousand of dimensions we generated from this data. But this one shown nicely the diversity between individuals when they are healthy. This is perhaps why homeopathy doesn't work, because when people are healthy, we are diverse. But apparently, these pigs get kind of close to each other when they get to the same level of instability, hemodynamic instability, which suggests why medicine may work. Because when we are sick in a particular way, we are more homogeneous than before. So if you find a solution for one person, it may actually work on another person. Okay, another attempt. So that's one thing that is observed. The other thing is that can be observed, and that's actually what convinced our friendly doctors with whom we worked on this project that our analysis makes sense, is when people are healthy, they show lots of variance in data. That's a good sign. In fact, it's an asymptotically correct statement, because if you are dead, you have zero variance in your vital signs, right? So it's all fine. And you will see that in this movie if you watched it. As the pigs become unstable, the amount of motion they show in the feature space reduced significantly. So you want to monitor for variance in data to have early detectors like this. And then people sometimes ask me, why do we believe that any analysis on pigs is relevant to humans? And then the doctors with whom we work assure me that in terms of hardware, cardiorespiratory hardware, we're basically identical. And then I have my independent sources that indicate that half of the human population, approximately, are pigs already. So, nice. Yeah, I don't know. I think I put it on YouTube. I'll let you know, and you guys will find it. Okay, now I want to flip forward. Maybe I should use this guy. Oh, look at this. Some magic stuff happened. See, so each pig has a different color, and as they get unstable, they kind of coalesce in the same region of the feature space. They are less different from each other, and also the amount of variance reduced over that period. Okay, I want to go to the next slide somehow. Thank you. A few things to mention. When the nuclear threat is already in the country, we have all these systems that we built over time that try to utilize data from multiple different sensing modalities, gamma ray detectors, neutron detectors, different sizes, portable size, huge back of a truck size, because we want to quickly identify those carriers of those things, even if they move on the back of in the back of a truck or are being pulled on a trolley at the sidewalk. So all sorts of computer vision applications try to dynamically segment the scenes so that we can put hypotheses on each of those moving objects or stationary objects like trash bins on a sidewalk to evaluate the likelihood of them containing a nuclear threat. And that's difficult because the background radiation, as we already indicated, is very noisy. Changes from time to time, from place to place, quite a lot. So it's not difficult to hide the nasty stuff in this noisy background. So that's a good challenge for machine learning, combined with physics and computer vision. Then what you see here is a large network. Actually, it's a small subset of a large network, working with law enforcement, both the police, federal agencies like FBI, and courts and prosecutors in the US and Canada, and now spanning to other countries, including the UK and France and somewhere in Asia also. We discovered that even with our machine learning that helps them prioritize the cases to follow in investigations, then they have a next bottleneck, which is how to assemble cases for court prosecution. That's very laborious and manual process. What you see is often this corkboard with different snippets of evidence pinned to the board, and the pins are connected with red thread. So that's the code name of our algorithm, red thread, that helps to automate this thing using large-scale social network analysis tools. Another opportunity for machine learning to make difference, reduce that bottleneck, speed up the process from finding the lead, using our software perhaps, pursuing the lead, collecting the evidence, and then putting it together into a form of a legal case that can be easily and effectively tried at a court. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I guess I don't have much time left, but it's another exciting application example where machine learning becomes an enabling technology for our high-tech stuff, other high-tech stuff. And in this case, it's advanced computer vision. One of my colleagues, another faculty at CMU Robotics Institute, developed this. He actually recycled the technology from a projector like this. And you know how you drive a car and it's raining or snowing? You cannot use your high beams lights, right? Because it would glare back at you and you will be blinded, right? It's very hard to see through rain and snow. But he figured if you do it right, you may avoid illuminating the individual droplets of rain or individual snowflakes. All you need is a projector like this with very precise control coupled with a camera that would very precisely figure out where the droplet was at the last nanosecond so that you don't illuminate it in the next nanosecond. Well, we are talking about 10 or 15 nanoseconds apart, okay? But it's very fast. So he actually developed headlights for the cars that let you see through snow and rain while driving, real time, with the help of machine learning to scale it. And then, of course, he can see through murky waters and other things. The core of the business, eventually, if you go deeper along the stack of different solutions, and some scary stuff includes seeing through makeup. I apologize, ladies, but we can do it. We can even classify what you are wearing, how much powder, how much cream. And I think it goes across genders. Wonderful application if somebody tries to masquerade for somebody else at the airport security crossing. We can see who they are underneath their makeup, right? Another thing, and I was giving a presentation to one of the three-letter agencies of the US government that usually wants to remain anonymous. It's, certain intelligence agency, I don't know who they are, really. And usually when they come to listen to our talks, they want to get up to speed with what academia is doing, they usually look super bored. They look like, oh, they heard everything. They don't know why they are here, The boss told them to come to this thing, and they are wasting perfectly good day where they could be spying for the country, right? Just waste of time. But this time, they actually started listening to me. I was reporting on a work by my colleagues, not just mine. We are working together. And it's about, what do you do when you can count all the photons hitting your camera lens in a room? Say you have an office room, the door is closed, And you have this camera open, and it just collects all the photons. So you can build distributions of what kind of stuff comes into the lens of the camera, right? And then you open the door. What's going to change? Those distributions, right? So if you collected data about this stuff and you saw what was actually outside, you can actually reconstruct what's outside of your room in a corridor without sticking your head or your camera outside of the room, looking around the corners. The ultimate dream of every spy. So all this audience suddenly woke up, and the hand went in the last row. When can we get it? This is when you know that you can make an impact. In this case, I'm not sure if you want to give that tool to these guys, right? Because they can use it against us, right? Except for certain agencies which are not authorized to operate in the United States. But whenever we travel, they can do that, right? But the ultimate goal here is to go crazy. And this was actually funded because we promised National Science Foundation that in 5 years we'll be able to see 5 centimeters into human body with regular light. No penetrating radiation involved. The only thing that we need to do, and that's simple on the surface, is to make sure that we can reconstruct trajectory of every photon that comes in and out from the human body. If you don't believe me, you can do what is shown on the top picture. Turn on your smartphone light, put against your finger, and you will see light going through. Some of it is actually coming back, so we want to capture the one that comes back. The problem is that every photon that enters our tissue apparently scatters about 10 times through about 1 millimeter of thickness of soft tissue. So they change direction a lot. So it's hard to reconstruct those trajectories. But we get lots of them, right? So if you are worried in machine learning about lack of data, that's not the problem. Making sense of the data is what's challenge. So the hope is that we can do MRI and CAT scans without penetrating radiation, perhaps with portable devices. We can already track red blood cells traveling through microveins and use that to diagnose cardiorespiratory conditions of patients. But it's only 2-3 millimeters, so we have ways to go. I guess our presentation was very convincing since we got funding for this work. I don't know how far we can take it. We promised 5 centimeters. That's ambitious. I'll let you know later. A few other things I don't have time for. One thing I want to mention. Machine learning, traditionally, uses an individual data point as a unit of analysis. That's a level of abstraction that standard algorithms look at. There is nothing wrong with increasing the level of abstraction and thinking about labeling distributions. So we have positive distribution and negative distribution of multiple data points. We can probably do the same with data sets. We can do the same with business rules, with functions, with formulas, with more abstract concepts. So I postulate creating this vertical axis of levels of abstraction, starting from individual data point at the bottom and reaching all the way up to whatever top. And we need to populate this axis with effective machine learning technologies that allow us to operate on these abstract data types. One example, we discovered that cardiac arrest survivors, people who suffered from their heart stopping to beat, they get damage to their brain, and that's a condition that is very hard to predict recovery from. And the extent of damage is also very hard to establish. So when you collect EEG data, you can actually see that correlation patterns change between patients who recover and those who don't. So the absolute distributions of data are very hard to distinguish, but the correlation patterns among some of the signals that we can extract are actually distinct. The first time we found it in this data. So correlations are different, not the distributions. Another thing I want to mention is, I'm going to go through this. We need another vertical axis in parallel to that first one. Different levels of abstraction of the feedback that we can collect from the users who are willing to label our data. They could be labels or numbers applied to any of those levels of abstraction on the first axis, but it could be more complex concepts, like comparisons. If you have a task to assign a biological age of a person from their facial image like this, it's hard, it's probably inconsistent. You ask the same question twice about the same face, you may have different answers if these people are in their 30s or 40s, or maybe late 20s. It's hard to pinpoint the exact age. But if you are given a simpler question, like this, who's older? Who looks older, right? That's easy to answer with more confidence. And just one step up, the axis of the abstraction of the feedback that we are receiving. And there are more of those. At the top of that axis is transfer learning, machine learning going green, recycling models that we created for the past 30 plus years and never came back to them. We always move on. Very frustrating, right? We are not optimizing our efforts. We should use the stuff that we built before to shorten our pain in building new models. Actually, deep learning community is doing it a lot, right? They have those pre-trained deep networks that they apply to everything by adding 1 or 2 more layers. It's pretty good. So basically here I'm explaining the algorithm that we built to learn from comparisons and then how it's applied to clinical settings, save the time for the doctors to annotate data, save their efforts, make them more confident about what they are telling us. So the data is better for training with fewer amounts, okay? And then a short listing of things that slow us down. And that will be a few slides that I'm going to go through quickly. Hopefully, we can fit it in the time that I have. First of all, we need more happy users and more eager adopters to be successful at the scales that we want here as a community. This will help us continue fielding, this will be helped by fielding successful applications and inspiring applications. For that, we need to partner with domain leaders so that we don't waste our time solving problems that don't really exist or don't really matter. I personally enjoy working with the best doctors in critical care, with the best physicists in nuclear engineering, but the best of the best in other places, because that really helps us focus and don't do stuff that they don't care about. Another thing that will get us more users and adopters, we want to make machine learning technology simpler to use, less intimidating. We don't want people to feel scared because it's fancy machine learning. We want them to feel good about it and using it. And so we need to make every effort to make our models understandable, offer time overlooked. We want to make results interpretable at the levels which are correct for the particular audience. And then I like this quote from Leonardo da Vinci: simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. We should make machine learning more affordable. Basically, reduce the need for data, make collecting data cheaper, and we want to make the models more deployable, smaller, more scalable. And then, one of the last slides, we want to be sure that whatever we do fits exactly well in the pipeline of processing that already exists. Most of the time when you do something that matters, you will be disruptive. You'll be replacing something that exists. It requires social skills, it requires politics, it requires solid technology that shows return on investment that will be acceptable by all levels of your receiving organization. So don't skip that step. Otherwise, you may spend lots of effort and then end up with not being accepted, even if your system is way better than the pre-existing one. So have a beer with the end users. Get friendly, with some of their bosses. This will help you figure out what are the pain points that bother them. And then you can solve their problems directly with your technology. Make them happy, make them friends of yours. And then, last but not least, we need more of us, the machine learning people. And I'm so happy to see so many of us here in Poland. This is great. This is great potential we should capitalize on and be the leaders in Europe. We can. We can. We need to accelerate, scale, and democratize training. We need to train people who are not in computer science programs, in mathematics and statistics, how to use this stuff so that we can have meaningful conversations with them when they end up leading those teams for whom we do the projects, right? And how do we encourage us to spend more time and effort on applied projects as opposed to theoretical projects? If you're a PhD student, how many of PhD students do we have here? A half of the room. Very good, congratulations, and good luck. But probably in Poland, the same as in the US, you'll be evaluated as a PhD student or young researcher for how many publications and where did you publish. And so my students really want to publish at NIPS or ICML or those places. And it's very hard to publish something that solves a real problem with random forest or logistic regression at these conferences. But what if this logistic regression saves people's lives? You cannot publish at NIPS. So you cannot show that on your resume. So we have this formidable dilemma here. What do you want to do? Do you want to save lives, or you want to have papers at NIPS? To me, I can afford making that answer very easy for me, because I don't have to worry about publications anymore. But for you, I think we need to figure out how to change the incentives so that you are, in fact, motivated to solve real problems. Because only then we can justify the existence of this field, when we make positive difference on societies and help people live better lives, longer, happier, more profitable. Thank you very much. We have time for questions?
Yes, at least two. All right, this was a wonderful talk, and I think even greater finish to the talk. Do we have any questions? So I actually do have a question. So given it's not directly machine learning related, although it's related to making a change using machine learning, you've brought up how difficult it is to work with public institutions. I am really tempted to ask about Peter Thiel and Palantir, and how is that fitting into the picture?
So, because I'm recorded, I don't know if I can answer this question in full.
Before we publish anything, we will ask you for authorization.
Okay. I don't have much first-hand experience working with Palantir technology. I'm aware of them, I know what they do, and I know I was very impressed with how they conquered the public sector market in the United States rather quickly, because they had wonderful visualization capabilities for complex network data. They started being funded by the intelligence community in the US and the US Department of Defense and Homeland Security alike to develop this technology, I believe, at Stanford University, and then they took it out to commercialize. So that was one of the success stories in how you convert academic research by spinning off a company and putting all your efforts into that company. As you noticed, the Autumn Lab, my team does it differently. We create prototypes of the technology, and we either partner with somebody else, or we have a small startup that can do it, but it's a small thing. We are not Palantir. More recently, I've been hearing from my government contracts, and I do work with multiple agencies of the US government. Some of them I can mention, some of them I can't, but that's okay, you can imagine.
No such agency.
Yeah, right. And they are a little bit worried about the costs. The licenses are pretty steep for Palantir. And I think that has been changing over time, but initially it didn't bring any significant analytic capabilities. So this might be changing. I know that they had some partnerships and they had some development from within. I don't know if that answers your question, but this is my assessment, what I see.
I think that's a good answer to me. Do we have any questions from the audience? There we go.
I have a question about the lab, which you are, the CMU. So my question is about the user engagement. So what was the story? Do you first started research and then institutions came to work with you, or you rather search for, you have people who engage users? What's the approach?
That's a very good question, thank you. And we don't have marketing department. That's the problem. If we had marketing department, I would have way more projects than I can report. At any given time, we have probably more than 20 funded research projects from the outside. Actually, everybody's salary, social benefits, and everything, computers that we have to buy from the external money. CMU is a relatively small school with no endowment, really, to mention. So even my salary as a tenured faculty, I have to generate from the outside. Some of it is accounted for because I teach occasionally, but everybody depends on getting money from the outside in the form of grants. Tenure for me means that I can stay there for as long as I wish, but I won't get salary unless I bring projects. Okay, so that's the deal. And the salary is not that great either. It's not for the money. So what it means is we operate like a small business, right? We need to survive by being competitive, being price competitive and quality of work competitive. And we have the reputation over the past 25 years of being able to do that. And the way we do this is about 70% of our funding comes from the government agencies, grant awarding agencies like NSF, DARPA, NIH, all those places. We write proposals, and some of them get funded. And then with industrial partners or government line organization partners who do not give money to academia for basic research, it's mostly word of mouth, our reputation. This is the only asset that we have. We cannot even stash the money that we spent from the projects. We have to give it back to the sponsors. So we don't have any buffer for survival. It's very tight. And if you work in an environment like this, you can probably survive anything. And I'm very, very happy with the team I have right now. But I want to mention this. I'm very unhappy with how few people from Poland are on my team. 0 right now, excluding me. And over the 20 years that I'm involved in this team right now, we had only 3 besides me. And they were all transients. They came and they went. I'm still looking for a PhD student from Poland. If you guys have any desire, just email me. Right there.
All right, on this note, could I ask for another round of applause?